It's June 10th of 2024, 7:22 p.m. I call this annual town meeting to order. First order of business is on a motion to admit. Mr. Studo.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the following non-registered voters and visitors be admitted to the meeting. Rob Carbone, NORCAM, freedom of the floor. Maureen Doherty, North Reading transcript, freedom of the floor. And further, that the following non-registered voters be admitted to the meeting and permitted to sit with the officials and departments they serve. Susan Duplain, Town Clerk. Stephanie Conley, Assistant Town Clerk. Delaney Sharkey, Staff. Danielle McKnight, Town Planner. Patrick Daly, Superintendent of Schools. Darren Klein, KP Law, Town Council. And further, that in the event of an overflow, the non-registered voters to be allowed to remain in the cafe. Move to everybody else?
Did you read?
Yeah. You want me to admit everybody else?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I move to admit the following: Matthew Cooper, Marianne McKay, Robert Collins, Jason Smith, Jerry Noel, Mark Zimmerman, Debbie Carbone, Matt Prince, John Eichman, Sharon Kelleher, Eleanor Ricard, Todd Wokel, Lillian Hartman, Dan O'Donnell, Sophia Navalovov, Michael Menipelli, Allison Kane, Heather Hinton, Bernard Sutherland, Pasquale Giovino, Logan Pemberton, Patricia Farrell, Elenia Rarney, Suketa Sirthem, if I'm butchering that name, sorry. Vanessa Steinmeier, Matthew McCalgy, Alan Barandi, and Joseph Parisi.
On the motion to admit, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Is there a no? Motion passes. I'll go over some of the protocols for tonight's meeting. So in the event we need to take a hand count, I have tellers to do a hand count. So counting to my right is Chris Hayden, and he will do the front and then all the folks on the floor. Counting to my left will be Jeff Simons, and he'll be counting the front and all the seats on the floor. Ralph Simard will count to my right in the bleachers, and he will count the two yellow sections. I know there are folks that are straddling two sections up there, so when it comes to a count, I would ask that you please go into a colored section so you can properly be counted. So Ralph Simard will count the yellow sections, and Lori Capizzuto will count the green sections. All registered voters should be wearing a badge. And if you're seeking recognition, please go to one of the microphones. Please do not shout out from your seat. You have to wait to be recognized by the moderator. And when you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record. And if you have a cell phone, I would ask that you please silence it or turn it off. And with that, I would ask Mr. Studo to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Studo, I'll entertain a motion to dispense with the reading of the warrant.
I move to dispense with the reading of the warrant and refer to articles by number, and further dispense with the reading of the return of service by the constable.
On the motion, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passed. Motion passes. Article 1, Mr. O'Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight, participating in this open town meeting process and having your votes count, have your voices heard. We're going to have a lot of discussion this evening about where the future of the community is going to be going, and we look forward to engaging with you and hopefully encouraging you to support the game plan moving forward. With that, Mr. Chairman, sorry to see you have a bad wing here. So no arm twisting on the moderator tonight. Mr. Moderator, I move to amend the fiscal year 2024 operating budget voted under Article 19 of the June 12, 2023 annual town meeting as follows. Transfer $15,000 from line 101, debt service, to line 6, general insurance, as specified in Article 1 as printed in the warrant.
On the motion, recommendation for the Select Board, Mr. O'Leary.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
For the Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just as clarification, this is additional insurance premiums on equipment which was purchased during the course of the year, as well as the purchase of insurance for 1 Central Street.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 2, Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Moderator, I move to pass over Article 2 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation from the Select Board, Mr. O'Leary.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Mrs. Herbert.
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Article 3, Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Moderator, I move to appropriate from free cash the amount of $239,000 to fund a deficit in the fiscal year 2024 snow and ice budget as specified in Article 3 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation for the Select Board, Mr. O'Leary.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee, Mrs. Herbert.
Finance Committee recommends.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Article 4, Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Moderator, I move to appropriate from free cash the amount of $1,300,552 to be added to the Capital Improvement Stabilization Fund as specified in Article 4 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation for the Select Board, Mr. O'Leary.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
305,000.
Further discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry, was it 300?
305,000. Say 300,000.
305,000. Did you say 305,000, 552? Motion in front of you?
Yeah, what I have in front of me is $1,305,552 even.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, the fund is used for capital purchases and debt service. The balance is $1,749,541. Going to add $1.3 million there or thereabouts to be applied to the operating budget, which will be Article 16, which is the general operating budget.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 5, Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Moderator, I move to pass over Article 5 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation from the Select Board, Mr. O'Leary.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee, Mr. Hill.
Finance Committee recommends passing over.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 6, Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Moderator, I move to appropriate from free cash the amount of $350,000 to be transferred to the stabilization fund as specified in Article 6 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation for the Select Board, Mr. O'Leary.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion? Please go to the microphone.
I got to tell you, I've never been up here before, and I've only been in town 45 years, so I'm not a townie, but
Name and address for the record.
Rick
please.
Bowden, 12 Freedom Drive.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do is ask, it's a germane question to actually all the articles that we've passed to transfer money. Where is this money sitting, or what has it been doing, or where is it going to be coming from? Is it out of future income? Is it monies that we might be sitting on from the sale of the property and condos over on 62? I mean, I've never understood the process, so I'm just asking for those of us who might not know. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. O'Leary.
In each and every one of the articles, we identify the source of where the money's coming from. In this particular case, it's free cash. So that's basically funds that were left over after we've accumulated all the money, paid all our bills. We have some leftover monies here that's been certified by the state, and then we reallocate it to different funds, or we spend it for different projects, or we spend it for new equipment. So each and every article will identify the source of the funds, where it came from, and where it's going to. In this particular case, this is free cash, which means money that's unexpended funds that we have available, and this is going to the stabilization fund, which is like our rainy day savings account. So that in case we have an emergency situation and we need to find a source of revenue here that, not through the normal course of raise and appropriate taxes, we would come back to town meeting and transfer it out of the stabilization fund to handle the situation. So each and every article will clearly identify the source of the revenue, where it's coming from, and where it's going. Good question. Thanks, Rick.
Further discussion?
Mr. Nelson.
As I hear you talk about there's money left over, has anybody considered maybe giving it back to the taxpayers?
We do on a regular basis. We do. And again, it's a question of, it's entirely up to town.
Sir, can I get your name and address for the record?
Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry. Avi Nelson, 478 Park Street.
Yes. In this particular case, we are giving it back to the taxpayers and putting it into the taxpayers' savings account for future reference when town meeting determines we need to spend it somewhere else. It all comes back to the taxpayers.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 7, Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Moderator, I move to pass over Article 7 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation for the Select Board,
Select Board unanimously recommends.
for the Finance Committee.
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion?
And again,
O'Leary.
this particular case, this will come before you with the October town meeting. Once all the money is certified and collected, again, this is the Solid Waste Stabilization Fund, which is your trash fees. So as your trash fees come in, it goes into this specified account. Once all the bills are paid, we'll have a certain amount of money available for transferring in to take care of maintenance and all the rest of things. So, but we won't have the final number until the fiscal year is closed out, which is June 30th. So we'll come back to you in October and make the transfer.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 8, Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Moderator, I move to appropriate for fiscal year 2024 Water Department retained earnings the sum of $136,720 to be transferred to the Water Infrastructure Stabilization Fund as specified in Article 8 as printed in the warrant.
The recommendation for the Select Board.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion.
Once again, this is from your water bills. It comes in, there's some additional revenue. We put it over into this water stabilization fund, which will help us either fund some infrastructure and/or stabilize rates. So the money's still being returned to the taxpayers, Mr. Nelson.
Further discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Article 9, Ms. Ms. Gonzalez.
Sorry, I have to lower that a little bit. Article 9, FY 2024, appropriate funds to participating funding arrangement fund. Balance is $2,174,268. Sorry. No transfer is anticipated, surplus from FY, do I need to read that? I don't need to read that. I move to pass over Article 9 as printed in the warrant.
The recommendation from the Select Board. Ms. Gonzalez.
Unanimous.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends passing over Article 9.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Article 10,
Article 10.
FY 2023, transfer funds to school district reserve fund for unanticipated, unbudgeted costs for special education, out-of-district tuition, or transportation. I move to appropriate from free cash the amount of $100,000 to be transferred to the school district reserve fund for unanticipated, unbudgeted costs for special education, out-of-district tuition, or transportation as specified in Article 10, as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation from the Select Board. Ms. Gonzalez.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
And the School Committee.
School Committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Article 11, Ms. Gonzalez.
Article 11, FY 2023, appropriate funds for legal expenses, 20 Elm Street. I move to pass over Article 11 as printed in the warrant.
The recommendation for the Select Board.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Article 12, Ms. Gonzalez.
Article 12, dissolve 102/104 Lowell Road Regulatory Inspections Revolving Fund. I move to approve Article 12 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation for the Select Board.
Unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion?
Emily Sonia, 24 Fieldcrest Terrace. I just had a question before we moved on. Do we know what the outstanding balance as of the 2023 fiscal year of the free cash balance was? I don't know if it was already discussed, but I just see we keep.
Gilberto.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Do we know what the standing balance as of the 2023 fiscal year for the free cash account was?
For free, So townwide free cash?
Yeah, so, because we keep taking from it and transferring to other accounts, I was just wondering what the account was at as of the 2023 fiscal
I
year.
believe at the start of the meeting was approximately $3 million
Okay.
that we're dealing with. This is not a transfer from that funding source, although we expect to be back here requesting an appropriation from free cash, because when the account closes and when the fund closes, that's where the funds will go.
Okay.
Mr. Yule.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Jeff Ewell, 427 Park Street. What is the purpose of dissolving this fund, and what was it used for?
Mr. Gilberto.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. The fund was established at the time the redevelopment of the former J.T. Berry property was approved. It was redeveloped as Martin's Landing, a 55-plus condominium community. We made a determination through town meeting to establish a revolving fund into which all of the building and other permit fees would be deposited, and the funds were to be used to cover any potential additional inspectional services that we needed to provide in order to protect the taxpayer from having to cover those costs. You can see the fund did really well, and we were able to really contain those costs, so we didn't have to draw too much out of it, the balance now being $1.1 million. It's the intention of the Select Board and the Capital Improvement Planning Committee that once this fund is dissolved, the balance of $1.1 million would close out to free cash, and we would be back here in October recommending that it be appropriated towards the purchase of a fire pumper truck.
Thank you.
Amy Sonia, 24 Fieldcrest Terrace. It's my understanding that Pulte is still building, and they have at least one more building to build, so why are we dissolving this fund before the building is complete?
So,
Mr. Gilberto.
through you, Mr. Moderator, that is correct, that construction is ongoing. There is one building that's under construction and one for which I believe they're in the process of pouring a foundation. We do expect additional permit fee revenue to come into the town. It's going to be a fraction of what we see there, and that would go to the general fund and be used to offset services, including in the building and health departments. But ultimately, if not spent, would go to free cash to be available for use at a future town meeting.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Article 13, Ms. Gonzalez.
Prior year bills. I move to authorize payment of bills of a prior fiscal year from the fiscal year 2024 operating budget voted under Article 19 of the June 12, 2023 annual town meeting in the following amounts. $55 from line 107, Hillview expenses for Hillview Alarm Monitoring Service. $89.24 from line 52, Public Works expenses for DPW tractor repair, as specified in Article 13, as printed in the warrant.
The prior year bills must be voted by a 4/5 vote of the meeting to pass. The recommendation from the Select Board,
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion? Please go to the microphone.
Good evening. Joe Lugo, 260 Martin's Landing. I noticed that in the previous 12 articles, you were transferring funds. In this article, and several articles subsequent to this one, there is the option of raising the monies by taxation. Do you care to elaborate about what that option is?
Go ahead.
Mr. Gilberto.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. So this article is really providing us the authority to pay a bill from a prior year. It's actually not appropriating any additional funding. It simply gives the departments that are named up here the ability to pay a bill that was incurred in a prior fiscal year from this year's funding. We're not actually asking for any additional funding to be appropriated either from Hillview or for DPW. Raise and appropriate is an alternative to fund it, but in this instance, we've determined that it's not necessary because there are already available appropriated funds approved at last June's town meeting. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Follow-up question. If that's the case, why is that wording included in the article?
Mr. Klein, this is our town council.
Darren Klein, KP Law Town Council. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I think what you're doing is you're confusing the article and the motion. The article basically lists a number of things that town meeting can do. The motion is what is actually being voted upon. So you'll see in a number of articles, it'll list a number of different possible funding sources. But the motion will list the specific funding sources being used.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're very
Appreciate
welcome.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Article 14, Ms. Gonzalez.
Select town officers. I move to authorize the select board to choose all necessary town officers not elected by ballot and to determine what instructions shall be given.
The recommendation for the select board.
Select board unanimously recommends.
Finance committee? No recommendation. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Article 15, Ms. Gonzalez.
Hear and act on reports of town officers and committees. I move to accept the printed town report for the calendar year 2023 as the report of town officers and committees.
Recommendation for the select board.
Select board unanimously recommends.
Finance committee, no recommendation? No recommendation. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Article 16.
Oh, I hear some wrestling. What we've been waiting for. This will come in two motions, motion 1 and motion 2. Motion 1 is our regular operating budget. It keeps the lights on. So just to clarify, motion 2 will be on the override. Motion 1 is just our regular operating budget, if you want to add anything.
Mr. Gilberto.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, just to reiterate that, as you may have seen in the warrant that was mailed to your homes, on the inside page, we described that this article was proposed to be taken up in two motions. The first was to appropriate funding within the limits of Proposition 2.5, so that's no additional tax increase or override. As Mrs. Gonzalez indicated, that would be a vote to basically continue the operation of town government into next fiscal year. So we are going to propose that a vote be taken on this motion, and then a second motion be offered with regard to the portion of next year's budget that is proposed to be funded through an override, that there would be a request for leave of the meeting for a presentation at that point in time, and then debate over that motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the recommendation from the select board?
Oh,
you got the motion, sorry.
Sorry. FY 2025 operating budget, I move to raise and appropriate and transfer the amounts set forth in the column headed Proposition 2.5 limit in lines 1 through 114, including the transfer of other funds totaling $90,627,932. All is set forth in the budget detail dated June 10th, 2024, as printed in the warrant. And further, that the lines for department salaries and expenses shall be considered a single appropriation for each department, except for line 100, which shall be for purposes of paying assessments to Northeast Metropolitan Regional Vocational High School and Essex North Agricultural and Technical High School as specified in Article 16 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation from the Select Board,
Select Board unanimously recommends.
the Finance Committee,
Finance Committee unanimously recommends.
Mr. Buckley for the School Committee.
School committee unanimously recommends.
Further discussion? Please go to the microphone.
Oh, excuse me. Hello, I'm Ray Kolajacek.
Can't hear you.
This one? This one? Yeah. Hello, I'm Ray Kolajacek, 6 Hillview Road.
No, the other one.
Try the other side.
Maybe go closer to it.
Ray Kolajacek, 6 Hillview Road. Nope.
Try that one.
Try the other one. Hey, that sounds better.
Ray Kolajacek, 6 Hillview Road. 6 Hillview Road in North Reading. That's where I live. You can look at my license if you'd like to. Anyways, I just wanted some clarification on the yes/no voting on this and then the vote that happens on the 18th. If there's a no vote on part 2 and a yes vote in the balloting, what are the ramifications? And same thing with the opposite way. If there's a yes note and then a no vote in the other direction, what are the ramifications? Thank you.
Whoa, we're not there yet. I mean, this is motion 1, right? Are you referring to the override?
Yeah, I'm saying if we vote yes on the override here, and then the vote on the 18th comes out no,
Then that budget we voted here with
Okay.
the override in it will
Okay.
not take place.
okay, and then if we vote no here, and then it comes out yes on the vote on the 18th, do we need to meet again to approve the budget with an
The
override?
budget would have to be approved by town meeting for the override that was approved on the ballot.
So there would need to be a second town meeting, is that what?
Mr. Klein?
So, just to follow up with what the moderator had said, Darren Klein through the moderator. If the contingent part of the budget, the override part, is approved tonight, but does not pass the ballot on the 18th, then the levy capacity, because of the ballot vote, I'm sorry, let me start over. If the contingent part of the override passes tonight, but gets voted down by the ballot, then the contingent part of the override would not be part of the budget. If the reverse happens, in that the contingent part of the budget is voted down by town meeting tonight, but then approved by the ballot on the 18th, the levy capacity would be increased by that amount, and it would be available to be appropriated by a future town meeting at any time up until the time the tax rate is set, which is usually in September or October.
Thank you.
Or no, usually November.
But we're still on motion 1.
Sir, name and address for the record.
If I could, oh, that was really loud. If I could just clarify, that was being asked about motion number 2. I just want to clarify again that this motion is motion number 1, which is the regular operating budget. The vote on this will be on the regular operating budget.
Sir.
My name is Paul De Niro, 402 Park Street. My question is, we have 2 votes this year and next year. This year, I think we've had discussions at various meetings saying that this year we probably don't need the money, but we will need it next year. I'm wondering why we don't just push this to next year to make sure we really do need it, because as we know, some of us know, I don't know how many people here understand that Proposition 2.5 override is a forever thing. I don't know if people really understand that or not. Like every single year that I don't know how much money is generated from 2.5 in 2025. How much would that generate?
Total number to you, Mr. Moderator?
About
$64 million, roughly.
$64 million?
Roughly.
So the town would be paying $64 million a year, right, for the rest of the town's life. Is that correct, how that works?
Are you asking about the current tax levy, Mr.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, the current tax levy is, I think, in this current year, 62.5, will go up to.
Yeah, so that's an awful lot of money, and we're only in debt $2.5 million for this year, for the budget for 2024, correct?
You know, the motion before us right now is the budget without the override.
Right.
So that's a separate motion that's going to be made. I think we should hold off on talking about the override. Let's talk about the budget and the motion before us.
Which budget, 2024, 2025?
Regular operating budget.
The operating budget for the town with no override. That's what's on the floor as a motion. So we need to stick to that. After we vote on that, they will be making another motion for a budget that's different, which includes an override. And that's when we can talk about the override.
So the budget without the override.
Is what's on the floor right now.
Okay, so we have the opportunity to what? To vote and say, yes, we like that? We don't?
We have the opportunity to discuss that budget. Yes, I like that. No, it's too high, or whatever.
Oh, can I
That's what we're discussing
transfer
now.
what I'm saying to the budget then?
You're talking about the override, and that's not on the floor.
Well,
Yeah. If we could please just stay with the operating budget, we will have time, we will take all the questions and answer all your questions for the second motion, which is the override. Right now, this is just the regular operating budget, if we could just vote on that. And then we'll go to the override motion, and then we can answer all of those questions. Please, if we could just get through motion 1, which is just the regular operating budget, not the 2.5
Okay.
override.
can I just say how I feel the two are sort of intertwined? You can't talk about one
They are not,
without
we are
the other.
within the limits of 2.5. Our regular operating budget is within the limits of 2.5. It's what we do every year to keep the lights on, to pay the bills. The second motion will be for the override, and that's when we can discuss the override.
Okay.
Thank you. So any further questions, if they could just be based on motion 1? Thank you.
The budget we're talking about now is the budget, if an override wasn't even on the table, that's the budget we'd be talking about, okay? So that's what I want to stay focused on. Otherwise, we'll be here multiple nights. So we're not going to talk about the override here. This is a budget, a level-funded budget. It has, I think, the school committee, or the finance committee, or the board of selectmen, they can talk about what's in it or not in it, but we're not going to talk about the override at this time. I think we need to hold that aside for when we get to the next one.
Yes.
Amy Sonia, 24 Fieldcrest Terrace. Just have a question in the budget without the override. There's a line item, Public Safety Administration, salaries, $30,082. Can you just explain to me what that is?
See that? I'm looking for it, Amy. Oh, I think I'm on the next motion. I think I have it.
Gilberto?
It's on page 24.
So if I understand the request, you're asking about the $30,000 for public safety administration listed in the departmental request line item. It is not proposed for funding in either the Proposition 2.5 limit or the override amount. So we are not intending to have that position in the fiscal year 2025 budget.
Okay, because looking at the book, it is posted, so I was just a little confused by that, because in all the presentations, that was removed from the budget, I thought.
Yep, it was requested from a departmental request standpoint. It did not survive the budget process. It's not being proposed to be funded next year.
Okay, thank you.
That's why I couldn't find it.
Further discussion?
Just a reminder, this is for motion 1, level funded.
Sir.
Good evening, Parker Moffett, 55 Central Street. Looking at the budget that we have in place under the limit, it looks like we're spending about 18% of our revenues on pensions. And I was curious if you could clarify how much of that is for current employees versus former employees of the town. Thank you.
Mr. Gilberto.
I'm sorry, I was answering another question. Could you repeat it? Thanks.
Of the 18% of our budget that we're spending on pensions, how much of that is for current employees versus former employees of the town?
So that is intended for two purposes. The first is for former, now retired employees of the town. The second is that there's a built-in accelerator, so it increases how much we pay in order to make sure that the pension system is actually fully funded by a date determined in state law, which I think is 2037. So we're actually paying a little bit more than what the actual amount is in there, but it's generally covering for retired employees.
So then you would say that most of that is for former employees of the town?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Just for Noel Kelly, 33 Leland Road, just for clarification, the total on page 35 as printed here is 92,713,159. The total as shown up here is 90,627,000 and odd. There's a 2 million difference there, give or take.
Could you repeat your number, sir?
92,713,159. On page 35.
So to be clear, that is the total recommended budget, including within the limits of Proposition 2.5.
Correct.
And within override. This motion is only for the portion of that that is within the current tax levy limit, $90 million, $90,627,932.
So I apologize. And this number I'm referring to here is not what we're talking about here. I apologize.
No,
I read that
columns
incorrectly.
to the left.
I understand. I apologize.
Further discussion? Seeing none, please go to the microphone. And actually, it would be easier if you do intend to speak, rather than have me try to survey the entire room and find a hand up. If you could just go to the microphone, and I will recognize you.
Rick Bowden, 12 Freedom. Obviously, anyone that can read this shows that we have about 47% of our budget is education related. Can you tell me about approximately how many students that services and what the average cost per student is? Because I know that most cities and towns, they study that number very carefully and gives it like a guideline, if you will, for the overall cost.
One moment.
Mr. Robin, Patrick Daly, Superintendent. We have about 2,500 students. It's around $20,000 per people. We can get you the exact number for next year.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have a second motion for this.
Yes. Motion to Article 16, FY 2025 operating budget. I move to raise and appropriate and transfer the amount set forth in the column headed override amount in the following lines.
Which would you prefer?
Line 10, town administrator salaries. Line 16, salary pool supplement. Line 32, information systems capital. Line 33, pension and benefits. Line 36, police department salaries. Line 39, fire department salaries. Line 40, fire department expenses. Line 45, code enforcement salaries. Line 49, health expenses. Line 52, public work expenses. Line 56, fuel, vehicle, pool expenses. Line 63, elder services expenses. Line 66, veteran services expenses. Line 71, youth services salaries. Line 81, public school salaries, teachers. Line 83, public school salaries, paraprofessionals, tutors. Line 84, public school salaries, custodial. Line 85, public school salaries, athletics. Line 88, public school salaries, technology support. Line 91, public school expenses, instruction. Line 92, public school expenses, student services. Line 93, public school expenses, operation and maintenance of plant. And line 112, parks and recreation, enterprise salaries. And to reduce the transfer from capital improvement stabilization fund for line 101, debt service to $746,860, and fund line 101, debt service with $800,000 from override, totaling $2,885,227. All as set forth in the budget detail dated June 10th, 2024, as printed in the warrant, and further, that the lines for department salaries and expenses shall be considered a single appropriation for each department, except for line 100, which shall be for purposes of paying assessments to Northeast Metropolitan Regional Vocational High School and Essex North Shore Agricultural and Technical High School, as specified in Article 16, as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation from the Select Board.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends.
School Committee, Mr. Buckley.
School Committee unanimously recommends.
Mr. Gilberto would like a 30-minute leave of the meeting for the purposes of a presentation. And I believe Mr. Daly's going to participate in that participation as well.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, excuse me. Mr. Moderator, through you, just for the benefit of those in the room, we've done a number of presentations, and we're looking to once again present some important background information for you to have before you decide whether or not to move forward with appropriations above and beyond Proposition 2.5 tonight. The Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Daly, and I would like to ask for a 30-minute leave of the meeting in order to make a presentation that will hopefully answer a lot of questions for folks, and then obviously the moderator will facilitate debate after that.
So, leave of the meeting requires a vote of the body. All those in favor of a 30-minute leave of the meeting, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. You have 30 minutes, Mr. Gilberto.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So just going through to let folks know, as we said here before, we have a collaborative budget process that includes representatives of the elected and appointed boards that are above my shoulder here on the screen. We work together on a strategy to allocate all of the revenue that comes in to the town, and we work to address budget shortfalls year in and year out, ultimately bringing a recommendation here to you. As I mentioned earlier, our property taxes are about $62 million out of an $81.5 million for this current year. The rest is state aid, departmental revenue, excise tax, investment income, debt exclusion, transfers, etc. Property taxes are our most predictable revenue stream over the long term. They can grow by no more than 2.5% from one year to the next. And In addition to that, new growth, which is the new construction of houses or other buildings, or renovations or development of land, can increase that amount above 2.5% paid by those developed properties. We look back over a 20-year period and we effectively saw that our fixed costs were increasing at about 5% per year on average. Our municipal department expenses about 3.3%, and our school department salaries and expenses about 4.1%, all three categories above that 2.5% number. That new growth I talked about, it's been a stabilizing force here in North Reading in our budgets. Goes back to subdivisions with larger homes on larger properties in the 1990s, the Edgewood apartments in the 2000s, and now, as we talked about earlier, Martin's Landing, which is coming to a conclusion. More recently, conservative budgeting has allowed us to balance the budget using free cash. So what we've done has been conservative in what we've allocated for departments and what our projections are for revenue, including permit fees and investment income, in order to make sure that we finish the year with a sufficient amount of funding appropriated. Whatever is left over becomes that free cash number. And those of you who have been in town meeting the past few years know we've had a pretty healthy free cash number. We're looking at our ability to use that to be coming to an end as we're forced to decrease the amount of money that we have in departmental budgets and increase our projections to take account for all those funds. We anticipate this will result in reduced money for services in the upcoming years. So this pie chart just shows you what we're dealing with for this current fiscal year 2025. As you know from the budget, the vast majority of funding does go to school operations, with some going to municipal, some going to fixed. This ratio is pretty common across towns throughout the state. If you look, one factor that might change things if it's you're in a city, or if you're looking at a regional school district, it may be a little bit different. But we're looking at about just about a $2.1 million deficit. Those of you at town meeting a year ago, you saw this slide. We knew that this was going to be a difficult year, that we would face difficult discussions about our priorities and what we could and couldn't do without an increase above and beyond Proposition 2.5. So this graphic is not intended to frustrate the folks in the audience. It's just intended to show that in red, our expenses are far outpacing our revenue streams. And if you look and see the smaller line in green on the left-hand side of the red shows you our revenues without a Proposition 2.5 override, and the sort of light blue color on the right-hand side of the red shows our revenues with a Proposition 2.5 override. And you can see that we see a few years where we're in a stable situation. It could be 3 to 5 years, but then again, we do see that there are challenges beyond that with our costs outpacing our revenues. So the financial planning team came up with two options. Our options are reduce school municipal services, to potentially our capital investments to align with our forecasted revenue, as you saw in that slide, or to increase property taxes in the form of a Proposition 2.5 override. I'm going to take a break just for a moment and turn it over to Dr. Daly for a presentation on North Reading Public Schools. Can you hold this and scroll right?
Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate everyone who's been here. We've heard some great questions at some of our forums that we've held, so I'm going to try to answer some of those frequently asked questions as we go. But you can see on the screen there are two budgets that we passed forward. Just to describe a bit about our budget process, we have a 5-year vision. You've heard it referred to as NRPS 2025. We get feedback from all stakeholders, certainly administrators, teachers, all staff, paraprofessionals, parents, students. We have a 5-year vision for the district, so we usually come into our meetings with a recommended NRPS budget, we have a modified budget, and then we have a level services budget, which is providing all the same supports and resources that we've had in the past. What we ended up passing this year was a non-override budget, which actually cuts $1.2 million and reduces 15.2 FTE for our district. The override budget, what that did was we further modified our modified level services. It restores all of those 15.2 positions into the budget, and it adds 4 positions. Some of them are part of that level services. So again, those additions, when we build a budget, it's not just to grow, right? It's because we've identified these are what student needs. So some of those positions that we're adding are the same services students have this year. To keep the same class sizes for first grade, for example, we need to have more first grade classrooms next year, and that's where those positions would be. In addition, this budget would recommend a 0.6 FTE school adjustment counselor. This would be to have our goal of 1 school adjustment counselor per building. 1.0 FTE academic interventionist. These are positions that are designed to help students who are falling behind to make sure that they stay on track. And I think it's very important to recognize one of the great questions that came up at one of our forums. These positions in the budget are meant to be there to save us money down the road, because we all know, and you saw our education, special education stabilization fund, when we have to place a student out of district because the district can no longer meet the needs, those costs greatly exceed what we're talking about here tonight. So these are positions that are meant to be proactive, to keep our students in programs and keep them in the district and help them succeed at the levels that we've become accustomed to in North Reading. The last part of this also continues our goal of further reducing full-day kindergarten tuition from $2,500 to $1,500. Just going to speak to that for one moment so that folks understand we're one of only about 15 districts that remain in the state that still have a tuition-based kindergarten program. In order to receive funding from the state through our Chapter 70 formula, there's actually a new Chapter 70 model called Student Opportunity Act, which is a part of that. And part of Student Opportunity Act, we need to have a plan. The goal that we've selected in the plan is the reduction of our kindergarten tuition. That's a report that we have to submit. It's a report that I collect stakeholder feedback from that we submit to the state. They actually, the drop-down menu is to eliminate pre-K tuition because most districts have already eliminated kindergarten, but I get a special permission in order to continue with kindergarten because we're one of the few districts that still have that. So again, this does not eliminate kindergarten fees, but it does further reduce it. We believe that there should not be a barrier to a free public education for our students. Since we've been lowering the tuition costs for kindergarten, we've seen the number of students that are selecting for the free half-day program has gone from about 45 down to about 7. So that clearly sends a message of how important this is to make sure that we're offering this opportunity to all of our students. So I'm just going to skip right into this. This is the $1.2 million in cuts. A few things that I've heard from people as I've been at some of the meetings is that, are these real? Are these real FTE reductions? And I will be the first to tell you that whenever possible, when we have to make these kind of cuts, and these are the cuts that are all a part of the budget that was just approved. If there is a retirement, if there is a resignation, we will make those moves first to not fill those positions so that we're not telling someone that they're out of a position. But those are essential positions that we need that would not be filled. But out of this list, I can tell you that in the last week or so, I've had to have those difficult one-to-one conversations with 9 or 10 individuals who got a letter last week telling them that they will not have a job due to a reduction in force. So this is very, very real. This is just for FY25, but this is what goes into effect. Reducing elementary classroom teachers by 3, the reduction of middle school, high school classroom teachers. This includes guidance counselors. This includes special education teachers at the middle school and high school level at the secondary. The reduction of our district nursing services. So we currently have 1 nurse per school, and we were able to add a floater nurse that gets around to many different schools. That nurse is a key position to provide coverage when those nurses are out, to provide additional support when there are screenings and other needs, medical needs for children. This position will be reduced to a 0.5. Similarly, we've enhanced our technology support in the past few years as we've grown to a 1-to-1 district. The number of devices in our district has gone, from when I first started here 15 years ago, where we had a few computer labs. Now every student in the district, 2,500 students, have their own devices. Every classroom has interactive technology. Everything in this room is technology. And so to have the reduction of a technology support staff really impacts students and staff. Reducing our academic support tutors at the elementary level. If you saw in the budget, we're talking about adding a teacher position. These are some part-time positions that we have now, 1 at each school. Those would be eliminated. Reducing our custodial cleaning staff. Just to clarify too, our custodians, not only are they essential for the cleanliness, safety, climate of our buildings, but they're also the first line for school safety. They're the ones checking the doors first thing in the morning and making sure there's no one here late at night. So reducing those custodial cleaning staff. We're still going to have our buildings staffed, but these are additional positions that help make sure that those buildings stay clean and safe. Reducing athletic coaching staff. Certainly, we've got great athletic programs here. We have junior varsity programs for students who don't make varsity. We have junior varsity 2 programs. And we also have some assistant coaches at the varsity level. We're talking about a few cuts here, and as I get into FY26 and 27, we'll see that there are more cuts on the horizon. Currently, we have kindergarten support paraprofessionals. This budget lists 3. We actually need to do, there will be 2 kindergarten general reductions, and then there will be 1 general paraprofessional reduction when we actually come down to figuring out exactly who's going to be needing to not be filled for next year. Those positions provide support with our youngest learners in our kindergarten classroom. We have our class sizes, and we have a paraprofessional in there to help with all of our kindergarten classes. Now this new model would still have paraprofessionals in the classroom, but they'd be shared among classrooms. So you'd have one paraprofessional that would float between different classrooms. So a very different experience for our students. Further reduction of our expense budgets, which we've been doing every year, and I think it's important to realize that we've been making for several years a lot of these cuts. Someone retires, they don't get replaced. We've been making all of those cuts over the last few years to make our budget balanced, and this year we're not able to do that any further. We're also talking about shifting additional cuts, making additional cuts to transportation and special education, looking at our food services revolving account and trying to put more out of that balance. And then finally, we may need to take a look, and with this budget, we'll be taking a look at increasing user fees for the busing program in our district. So that's for FY25. Just as an overview for FY26 and 27, and this is why, as a finance planning team, we've approached this as a multi-year approach, because we know that what's on the table from the town for next year is actually is over $1 million less than what is on the board for this year, meaning our gap is going to be twice as much in the future. So if we cut 15-2 positions this year, you can imagine what that would look like next year and the following year. These are not individual positions, but we would see further impacts to our elementary and secondary classroom teachers, further impacts to our secondary special education teachers and programs, our school adjustment counselors at all buildings. If you recall, we're trying to add a position this year to get to one per building. We'd possibly be needing to have those positions off the table in the future. Certainly administrative positions. Our world language program, we would be addressing that, most likely world language and computer science at the middle school. If you know that those are newer programs that we've added to expand those offerings in the past few years. Our tech engineering program, art engineering, art, architecture, design programs at the high school, certainly impact our art, band, and chorus programs. We've been able to offer some great AP courses and electives that certainly would come into question when we start looking at class size reductions. Our overall digital learning program, we had to reduce last year. One of our digital learning specialists was not replaced. We would have to make further cuts in that program, quite possibly in FY26 and 27. Further cuts to our athletic program. Again, JV2 teams, assistant coaches, those programs would certainly be questioned. Performing arts across the board would see an impact. Continuing to look at our busing transportation and continuing to look at custodial services. So this is the next 2 years, and we're not here to be doom and gloom, or this is the reality of what we will be facing. When I've heard through some of the questions that it's our job to tighten our belts, what our job is to inform the public of the impact of our decisions. And so many of you have heard about those impacts. Our principals did a wonderful job, and our directors explaining the impacts at our budget hearings, and we can certainly answer additional questions tonight. But this is our next 3 years. What we're showing you is these are the impacts to the budget cuts if we stay on the trajectory that we're currently on. Just very quickly to look at class sizes, because we'll hear sometimes about class size. We are actually slightly above the state average with our class size average across K-12 of 18. And we've heard a little bit about administration costs, that we're top heavy. This is comparing us to, as we always do, what we call our DART districts, which are districts of similar size, makeup, demographics, and also some of our contiguous districts. And some of those districts are one and the same. They're similar and they're next door. But you can see that we're about 3% there versus 3.5% for the state average. So I just wanted to make sure that we presented this information to you here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Dr. Daly, as well. The challenges are not limited to our public schools. We have a number of actions that we're going to need to take for the fiscal year 2025 municipal departments. So think police, fire, DPW, town hall, etc., where we are able to reduce appropriations and likely reduce how much funding will be available through free cash, so funding that gets left over from one year to the next. We have a couple of vacant positions that we would be leaving vacant for the upcoming year. They would not be funded in the budget. As I've said in many different forums, there's challenges for the fiscal year 2025 municipal departments. They're not quite as great as they are for the school, the North Reading Public Schools, but when we get to future fiscal years, it gets dramatically more challenging. So what you're looking up there, the numbers in red, they total up to a percentage of about 20% of the total municipal departmental budget. So all of the municipal departments I just described together, I'll point you to the numbers in red. The deficit, about $4.3 million over a 2-year period, not this coming year, but the year after and the year after that. It's a daunting number for us to be looking at, and granted, these are projections, but we do feel it's our obligation to share them with you here. If you look at this allocation of potential reductions and their impact, I have to be very clear that if we made every one of these reductions, we would not balance the budget. The extent to which we would have to cut, and some of the lower ones, I think is something that's beyond anyone in the community is willing to accept. But we would start with less impactful reductions, which we do every year anyway, but we would make them in a more dramatic way that may affect departmental efficiency and our compliance with professional standards. And then we get into things that will have impacts on folks, like conditions of our buildings. We talked about street sweeping and yard waste drop off as well, potentially being impacted. We're fortunate this year we were able to make quite a bit of progress without relying on a contractor, but in some years we've been able to rely heavily on that service. Transportation services, if you've been up at the senior center, you know we've been able to expand that dramatically. That would be in jeopardy. And then we get into non-emergency services provided by police and fire department, which is obviously a concern, as well as potentially reducing or eliminating our subsidy to the Parks and Recreation enterprise. Just going through, again, these get more dramatically impactful if you get through them as you go through the list, including human services impacts, our library, reducing administrative and professional staffing in the town hall, which will affect the quality of services that we provide, and the turnaround in providing those services as well in the town hall. And then we get into, again, non-emergency services in public safety departments, public works, and ultimately potential impacts on police and fire. So talking about the override, we've talked about a $10 million override that is proposed to be phased in over a 3-year period. So because of Proposition 2.5, that number actually increases each year by 2.5%. So the total, when we get to the end of the 3-year period, is $10.5 million. We are proposing to allocate through that through our normal funding formulas for municipal and school services. Over the 3-year period, it would be phased in over that time. We tried to balance it to the extent that we could in terms of the impact for this upcoming year and the 2 years thereafter. To really summarize it for you, though, you see where the funding is proposed to go, and I'm going to just point you right to the number in bold there at $8.254 million. That's the total portion of this override that's being requested to maintain our current level of services and the town's sound financial position. So we're talking about capital investment in the form of 2 bridges that need to be rebuilt. Those are not costs for the project, those are annual debt service payments that we would need to make on those projects, which would be brought back for approval at a separate town meeting, most likely in October, as well as a ladder truck replacement, and then maintaining current municipal and school services. We go down the bottom, to the bottom, we've tried to identify future capital needs that we foresee will be there and for which there may not be a funding source, as well as additional municipal and school initiatives, which total up to the $10.579 million amount over the 3-year period. When we talk about the cost, we talk about it in terms of the average single-family home at $812,000 in valuation. That's not your Zillow number, that's not your Realtor.com, that's the assessed value that you get on your tax bill each year. The impact is anticipated to be $1,721.22 for that average single-family home over a 3-year period. That it's an increase over a 3-year period, and to be clear, it is permanent at the end, meaning that increase will be phased in gradually and then remain in place in future fiscal years. If you know the value of your house through the town's assessment, if you divide that number by $1,000 and multiply by $2.12, you're going to come up with what your tax bill impact would be over that period of time. I need to make very clear for folks, in the absence of an operating budget override, we are still going to need to come back to you to ask for a tax increase in the form of a debt exclusion for the 3 capital projects, Chestnut Street, Burroughs Road, and the ladder truck. How am I doing on time, Mr. Moderator?
You still have time.
Okay. So we show an estimated 3-year impact on this, and what we really tried to do is, to the extent that we could, spread it out as evenly as possible over a 3-year period. And what we ended up with is a total impact projected for this upcoming year, fiscal year 2025, of $495.26, again, for that average single-family home. $682 the year after, fiscal year 2026, which begins on July 1st, 2025, and then $552.09 in the final year of this phased-in increase, fiscal year 2027, for that grand total of $1,729.35. We put this allocation up there for Martin's Landing because it's a relatively new development. There's a lot of units that are in there. The average valuation over there is $551,336. The impact, roughly $1,218.77 for the average. To be clear, things that we have funded here at this town meeting without an override or debt exclusion include the reconstruction of the Northeast Metropolitan Regional Vocational School in Wakefield, the Little School roof replacement, our annual investments in capital such as vehicles, equipment, and building repairs, funding our other post-employment benefit obligations, which we set aside in a future article tonight, and then funding our pension obligations. I want to talk a little bit about our actions to control costs over the past 10 years, multiple plan design changes to health insurance offerings, including the establishment of deductibles for employees, copay increases, and altering prescription programs. We established a participating funding arrangement, which for a municipality is fairly innovative, where we're able to basically buy lower cost insurance and reinsure a more expensive program to bring down the total premium. We've deferred roughly $3.5 million in municipal departmental budget requests over 5 years, and for North Reading Public Schools, there's about $2 million that's been deferred. So this is the override history. It's a little bit misleading because there were a handful of votes all taken in 1991 that were not approved. The last override approved was in fiscal year 2005 for general operating, and then there was a fiscal year 2008 and 2009 request that was not approved. And there has not been a request submitted until now. Just giving you a little bit of history for surrounding towns. We have it up on the screen there. 57 votes taken since 1990. 19 were won and 38 lost. That data is from the State Department of Revenue. Just to be clear, what's not proposed to be authorized by the override? We are not authorizing a wastewater or sewer project. That would require separate authorization for borrowing. There are 3 capital projects, which I mentioned, 2 bridges and the fire truck. Fire station construction project is not part of this override. It is not proposed to be funded. It would require separate authorization for borrowing and is slated to be considered under Article 34 tonight. And it does not authorize raises for public employees. Those are obligations that are included in collective bargaining agreements or similar agreements. So final considerations, there are other projects that could have an impact on taxes in the short and long term, but they require separate approval here at town meeting, and if involving a debt exclusion or additional tax increase, they would require a ballot at a town election. Our collective leadership at the front of the room here has identified the financial strain on the annual budget as urgent, and we're therefore proposing a Proposition 2.5 override or tax increase to stabilize municipal and school services and our overall favorable financial standing. We recognize that the decision to support or oppose an override is an individual voter's decision, and that there are many factors that you must consider when you make that decision. But we do feel it is our obligation to let you know that in the absence of additional tax revenue, there will be direct adverse school and municipal service impacts over the next 18 months and beyond. Next steps, again, we're here for the town meeting discussion. We have a ballot vote for which early voting is open right now in person by mail. At the town hall, with the election day being June 18th. And as I think many of you know, we've got a whole bunch more information that we've posted on the town website. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you very much for your attention.
Go to the microphone, please.
Pat Fillmore, 24 Fieldcrest Terrace. I have a couple of questions. One for Dr. Daly. Out of the positions that are being cut, how many of those were hired under the temporary COVID funding with the understanding that they were temporary positions?
Mr. Daly.
Sure. So we've spoken quite a bit about the ESSER funding. We have a position, the floater nurse that I spoke to, that was a position that was done under ESSER funding. We absolutely needed a nurse prior to COVID. We used an allowable expense to have funding for COVID for that, and we certainly have that continuing forward. We also have a 0.5 reduction of a technician that was used with ESSER funding. Michael, I believe those are the two, right? Yeah.
So none of the teaching staff?
No.
You're letting go, were hired under, I mean, because I think at one point when the discussions were being talked about with the COVID funding, that you hired a certain number of teachers. But I could have read it wrong in the paper, but
No, we did not. We used that funding for the nurse, the technician, and is there another position that we're talking about? The adjustment counselors at that point? Yeah, so the adjustment counselors at one point were on the chopping block for FY '25. We did not do that. But they are in '26 and '27. Those are positions that you might think of through that.
okay, but they were all under the impression that they were
Yeah,
temporary
it was
positions.
$400,000 for the
Okay.
ESSER funds, and so those are the two positions that
Okay.
are directly impacted.
All right, next question would be for the town administrator. And Mr. Gilberto, we have discussed this many times. The bridge on Chestnut Street, the bridge on Burroughs Road, which have been going on for a very long time. You have money in there for that. The Pulte funding is the people's money to take care of infrastructure and big capital items. Why can't that money be used for those plus a ladder truck? Those are big capital investments, and it's for infrastructure.
Mr. Gilberto. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It's an excellent question. For those who do not know, the Pulte funds are the funds that the town received through a sale partnership with the state when we purchased for $1 the former J.T. Berry, the remaining portion of the former J.T. Berry property, and sold it for $30 million to a developer for Martin's Landing. Our proceeds were about $19 million from that sale. About $3 million of it was appropriated to study the wastewater project 3 years ago now, and $16 million remains. And I think, and again, I'm sharing what I think is a position of most folks at the front here, we know that there are a number of very significant projects on the horizon. We talked about wastewater as potentially being one of them. We know there's a fire station project that's on the horizon. There's been quite a bit of conversation about what would likely be a multi-million-dollar intergenerational community center. And I think the collective will of the town's leadership is to hold that funding so that we can minimize the impact of those projects when we are ready to proceed in future years. But to be clear, these funds could be used for that purpose. I don't want anyone to be misled, but we do feel an obligation to share with you that there are other projects on the horizon for which we don't have available funding within the tax revenue.
But right now, we do have available funding to fix those big problems. The bridges on Chestnut and Burroughs, and again, those have been going on for many, many years. It's just not something that popped up out of this, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. That's not what's happening. This has been going on for a long, long time. And again, the ladder truck. We're going to be charging these people for extra money to pay this budget when we have money that can take care of it. And the interest that you get for $16 million is probably a lot of money, but the interest you'd get on $14 million is also a lot of money. So you could use $2 million to fix those things and get the ladder truck and not overburden the public
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moderator,
with their money.
Mr. Gilberto. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, to be very clear, the three projects that were identified are a lawful use of those funds. We could appropriate those funds toward those projects. But I should also be very clear that one of the revenue streams that we've been relying on for the past couple of years is investment income. So that $16 million is invested. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue that come in that have allowed us to stabilize services. So I think a number of us are hesitant to now allocate those funds toward other projects and potentially jeopardize that revenue stream as soon as this upcoming year. The other thing I will say in terms of the timeline, the bridges, they're older, the infrastructure is older, we know that. I think our planning with regard to Chestnut Street goes back either 2 or 3 years. We were here, we sought funding for design, we proceeded with working on an initial study to determine the condition of the bridge. The condition deteriorated more rapidly than we expected, and it resulted in it needing to be hastily closed. None of us up here wanted to close that bridge, believe me, and we understand the frustration. But to replace that bridge is a multi-year design and permitting process that we are now in the middle of. We cleared a significant hurdle. Representative Jones was able to help us get legislation passed so that we could properly site the location of the bridge on some wetland and conservation land that's nearby. But they are multi-year planning projects that we're working on. Those projects are also projected right now to be as high as $4 million each. So that would more than eat up our entire annual capital budget from one year to the next, if not funded in some other way. To be clear, yes, Pulte funding could be used for those projects, but when we talk about building projects, they generally are in the $5 to $10 to $15 million amount when we look at either a significant reconstruction or a new construction. And I think the feeling up the front of the room here is we ought to be prepared to the best we can to leverage that and perhaps mitigate the impact of any one of those very expensive projects. Thank you.
Deb Picciuto, 26 Lindor Road. This question is to our town administrator. Is it correct in Article 17 and Article 18, we are going to do what we could do to diminish the impact on our senior citizens of the tax burden to those most vulnerable in the town by passing an increase in the senior tax rebate to property owners who are senior citizens, and putting forward a home rule petition through to the legislature to increase the exemptions to senior citizens who are the most vulnerable to get additional exemptions on their taxes. It's unfortunate that these two are positioned after this discussion, but I wanted to bring to the attention to all that these are two significant tools that are here to assist senior citizen property owners to reduce their tax burden. Is that not accurate?
Yes, it's correct, and we have both a proposal to increase that senior tax work-off program to the state law allowed maximum of $2,000 per year, and then we're going above and beyond what is authorized by state law by creating a separate program to provide additional tax relief through a home rule petition. We're not unique in doing that, but we are looking to do something that is outside of what state law normally allows, and that's something the Select Board and others have been looking at on and off for at least 10 years. And so we'll certainly talk about those articles when we get to them, but that is correct.
Thank you.
I'm going to let Mr. Davis from the Finance Committee speak. You're speaking on behalf of the committee, is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
So they haven't
Moderator.
addressed the body tonight, so.
So, recognizing this article is a little more involved and much bigger impact to the community than some of the other articles that we have, we wanted to provide a little more color on the Finance Committee's position rather than the simple recommend or not recommend comment that you've heard from others. So before getting into that detail, just a little background on the Finance Committee. I'm sorry. So just a little background on the Finance Committee. We're actually a group of 9 appointed individuals. We aren't elected by the town. The purpose of that is so we can provide some checks and balances against the elected officials. The Select Board is elected, School Committee is elected, and the Finance Committee is appointed in between. So we have regular, frequent meetings with the town administrator. Our goal is to recommend budgets that are fiscally responsible and sustainable. And in general, we're not keen on spending on non-essential services or initiatives. As mentioned previously, it's been very hard in the recent years to balance the budget. And we've had many frequent conversations in regards to it. So for the override, I don't want to duplicate what all has already been said by others, but I want to highlight a few things the Finance Committee is focused on. So first, we looked at inflation. That's been mentioned. 20-year history, cost 5% increase, municipal cost 3% increase, school cost 4% increase. We looked how we compared as a town to other towns and the state average. Our increases are in line with the state average. Our municipal increases have actually been slightly below the state average. A lot of people ask how we compare to other towns, and we compare very favorably right now. So we concluded that cost pressures were real and not unique. So then we looked at what the baseline should be. So inflation is reasonable, so what about the baseline? So for that, we took the operating budget of North Reading, divided that by a number of people in town, that's the per capita spend, and then we compared that to other towns in our cohort, which similar to the school committee is towns in our region, as well as towns of similar size in other areas of the state. So Reading, Wilmington, Andover, and the like. Those statistics show that our spend is in line with our cohort towns. We're actually slightly below Andover, we're below Wilmington on a per capita basis. In fairness, we're higher than Reading and higher than Middleton, but I'd argue those towns have some slightly different characteristics in the makeup. But overall, we included that our costs were in line. So inflation was in line and costs were in line. And these are the things that I'd hope you expect us to look at on a regular basis, not just with an override. So that's the objective data. And so then we need to look at the qualitative data. So we've kind of concluded the numbers make sense. But now we need to continue or look to see whether we want to continue those services that we think do make sense, or if we don't want to pay for those and otherwise want to change the amount of services that we have. And that's really what we're voting on here. We don't need to be like our peer communities. That's just one data point. The town administrator, the financial planning committee have been very creative, as they've mentioned before. Department heads have applied for grants, et cetera. So I commend them for their hard work and their dedication to keeping costs in line, but now we're kind of at a fork in the road where we need to decide what we need to do. On one side, we can cut services. We've been through all of the presentation about what that means. On the other side, we can increase taxes, and we've been talking about that now too. So I can say requesting taxes is something that the Finance Committee doesn't take lightly. I can confidently say everyone on the Finance Committee has been speaking about this in quite a bit of detail to many people in town. But at the end of the day, as a group, we've unanimously voted to recommend the Proposition 2.5 override. We'd encourage you to vote in favor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sarah McGoldrick, 4 John Bickford Way. Like so many of you here tonight, I love this town. I love that tree on the common. I love Ryers. And I love this community. You've heard tonight how we have schools that are excellent. We have streets that are safe. We have a town where people want to live. And we do all of that spending less than the average on students, larger than average classroom size. How do we do it? How have we done it? The people who keep our streets safe, who run our schools, who run this town, are exceptional. We are surviving. In fact, we are thriving on the backs of these people. And they are telling us here tonight, they have sharpened the pencil. They have tightened the belt. There is no more money. The cost to our town, the cost to our schools, the cost to this community in the long run is more than it can bear. The only option is for each of us to pay a little bit more tax to make this work and come up with a long-term solution, wait for it, to address the revenue issue in this town. I urge each of you to vote yes. Vote yes tonight, vote yes at Town Hall this week, or vote yes at St. Teresa's on Tuesday.
Amy Sonia, 24 Fieldcrest Terrace. I just had a question for Dr. Daly. In his presentation, he spoke of JV2 teams being cut. I actually was just on the app for the Cape Ann League, and I don't believe there are any schools in the Cape Ann League that still have JV2 teams, which were at one time considered freshmen. I believe all of Cape Ann only has varsity and JV, no JV teams. I could be wrong, but I'm just questioning that because I don't believe we do.
Mr. Daly. Yes, I look to Michael on this as well. We certainly have JV programs, right?
Yes, but you said JV and JV2. JV2 is completely different. It's a freshman group. It typically was a freshman group. It was freshmen.
We have JV2 programs.
Okay, because when my kids were in school just 2 years ago, they had no JV2 programs. So I was just confused by that. When I looked at the app, I didn't see it.
Sure, it depends on the numbers, but we do, if we have enough numbers, we can run a second program for kids.
So when we don't have a JV2 program, what do you do with the money that you use to fund those positions that you don't need?
If we don't have the programs, we wouldn't, I'm not sure I understand.
So if there is no JV program, in your budget, you have a JV2 coach and his salary or stipend, I don't know how you refer to that.
Yeah.
If that position is not needed, what happens to that stipend that's budgeted for a coach that's not needed? It's just an example, any
Sure.
position.
Sure, well, it's a little different with those programs because those athletic programs are heavily funded by the budget offsets of the student activity fees so if those students aren't involved in a sports program, that revenue is not coming in and those coaches are not paid. So it kind of is self-fulfilling. If we don't have the programs, there's not budgeted money from the operating budget that goes there, and it would, in this case, it would need to go to fund the other coaches and the other programs.
Because the operating budget is determined before you have the number of players.
So the part of the operating budget that goes to those positions would be reallocated to other coaching positions, and then the part that's offset by the student fees and the other players who are on the team that doesn't exist, that's not money that we would be collecting.
Okay. It confuses me when I see positions that are being included in your budget, but those positions aren't necessarily filled. So it makes me wonder where the money for those positions go when it's not used. I guess that's my question.
You want to speak to Michael? Mr. Moderator, sorry. The Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, Michael Conley. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Great, thank you. So I can speak to your question. So I just wanted to clarify one. So there are, if this were not to pass, there's the potential that we would be cutting the athletic budget as Dr. Daly has proposed. And we have worked with Mr. Johnson, the athletic director, to identify, coaching positions that would be impacted. We have not had, we've had strong participation in the athletic programs for a number of years. So the positions that we have budgeted, either through the operating budget, and then there's obviously, as Dr. Daly was alluding to, there's revenue that comes in through the user fee that's assessed for the programs, and that helps also support a variety of the expenses in the program. It's about a 45 to 55% split currently. We have not had really, because of the participation in the program and the athletic programs that have done very, very well, a need to have unfilled positions. Your question is if that were be the case because the participation declines in any given year, that would remain unfilled, and that line item would remain, and then it would just be there unspent at the end of the year or repurposed as we close out that fiscal year.
So how is it repurposed?
So we would identify at the end of the year if there's funds available. We would prioritize other expenses, other needs, and what we've typically done if there's money available at the end of the year. And again, that has not been the case for athletics because there's been a need to run a variety of those programs. But if there's money available at the end of the year for the variety of reasons, and that's usually a small amount, less than 1% of our budgeted allocation, then we openly speak to the school committee, the finance planning team, and we look to carry over those funds. In most cases, what we're doing is we're prepaying special education tuitions for the following year, which we're legally able to do through state law, because that is the most volatile, unpredictable line item in our school budget.
Okay, thank you. And then another question, Mr. Gilberto, this is more towards you regarding the Pulte funds, and I'm just going to reiterate what Mrs. Fillmore said. The Pulte funds belong to the taxpayers, and I truly believe the taxpayers need to be educated that they can use that money for infrastructure repairs that we truly need. We don't need an override to fix the bridges, and the taxpayers need to know that. If your furnace blew up today and you had $1 million in your bank account, would you ask your friends to help you pay for that, or would you take the money out of your bank account to pay for your furnace?
Mr. Gilberto.
I'm happy to respond, and my response is this. Again, depends what else is on the horizon. What other expenses do we foresee coming? And here in North Reading, we foresee a significant investment in municipal buildings in particular that's necessary. We've invested in our schools, including the building that we're in here, over the past 10 years, but our municipal buildings are also in need. We had thought that in addition to that, a wastewater project could have been partially funded using Pulte funds. The town has expressed that that's not the direction it wants to go in at this point in time. That's totally okay, and the select board acted appropriately or acted in accordance with that. But that said, we know that there are significant challenges that exceed what we can fund in future years, particularly when we talk about these buildings.
So if the taxpayers choose to bring forward something to use that Pulte money, what do they need to do to bring that forward?
I guess some of it's going to depend upon the response of the moderator, but there's certainly the ability to offer an amendment. There's the ability to file a citizen's petition as well for a particular expenditure of funding. Those are all options that are available. I should also note the use of the funds is not limited to infrastructure or capital investment. It can be utilized for debt service as well. So again, full disclosure, that funding can be used for that purpose. But the question that we would also need to ask ourselves is what happens when those funds run out and we still have debt that we carry.
Thank you. I just think it's important for the taxpayers to know that it's their money to make a decision with. The select board, the finance committee, the town administrator, they don't own that money. We as taxpayers own it, and I think it's important that we are educated on how we can use it.
Laurie.
Laurie Ann Galvin, Finance Director and resident. One thing I want to point out about the Pulte funds, and I think Mr. Gilberto had mentioned this, the interest rates are extremely high right now. We are earning a substantial sum, over $2 million a year, on that fund in interest. That contributes to our annual free cash. Without that free cash, our bond rating, our Moody's looks at our free cash each year. We are supposed to have 3 to 5% of our operating budget in free cash. If we don't have those funds, we lose our bond rating, which will cost us much, much more in the long run in terms of our borrowing costs. We almost were upgraded this year. We are financially strong, but if we spend those funds, especially while the interest rates are high, we really jeopardize our standing. I thought it was important to point that out.
Yep. Robert Atkinson Jr., 82 Elm Street. First a comment, then a question. I just want to thank all the town officials, both paid and unpaid, who've obviously put a lot of work into this, and especially the unpaid folks, because they're doing this, a lot of them work full time, and they're doing this on their own time, so I think that deserves a round of applause. That being said, now I'm truly on the fence on this because I'm retired, my mom's retired, she's 94, I'm taking care of her, and she's on a fixed income, I'm on a fixed income. This is going to hurt. And unfortunately, a lot of this is a result of policies in Washington over the past 3.5 years. I won't get into particulars, but certainly the rate of inflation is a result of those policies. So go vote in November. That being said, everybody is affected by this. People on fixed income, retirees, people in the school who have kids in the schools. Obviously, the folks with kids in the schools want to get the best for their kids, and we were all young once. We were all in school, and our parents wanted the best for us, which comes to my question. Based on the presentation last week on Zoom to discuss this issue, it was important to me that we are contractually limited based on the union contract with the teachers union. They cannot have a class size in excess of 30. Is there any room for increasing the level beyond the 18.2 average you postulated in an attempt to mitigate this to a certain extent? Now, let me preface this with some of my own personal notes. During that presentation, I noted to Mr. Gilberto that my first grade class had 55 students in it. Okay? So when I hear the teachers' unions complain about 30 students, I laugh. Now, with that being said, I was taught at St. John the Evangelist in Beverly, Massachusetts by the Good Sisters of Notre Dame. They had an advantage that public school teachers don't have. They could hit us, and they did, often. So, with that being said, a class size of 54 was manageable. I was wrong. I was off by 1. It was 54, not 55. And anybody who wants to see my first grade class picture, I brought it with me tonight. So that being said, is there any room for increasing class sizes to mitigate the potential budget impacts?
Mr. Moderator? So,
yeah.
Yes. So just to be clear, the class size limit of 30, if this override does not go through, we will be approaching that number in many of our classrooms. We will be up in the high 20s in many of our classes. So it will happen because it's going to start happening starting with this year, with our class sizes not being at that optimal. For our younger grades, we try to keep it between 18 and 20. We're going to be getting up into the low 20s, and the upper grades are going to be getting into the mid to high 20s. That's going to happen. It's going to compound every year.
Okay. One more comment. I didn't see a class size under 40 until I got past 6th grade. Yeah. I didn't see a class size under 30 till I hit high school. And I didn't see a class size under 20 till I went to college at University of Lowell, now UMass Lowell. So with that being said, why is that such a hardship for the kids now?
Sure. I can speak to, sure. I will just say that the world has changed quite a bit. What our kids need today, the individual attention that they need. The goal for educating all of our students, meeting the students where they are, and trying to make sure that students get all of the learning opportunities that they deserve. Our goal is to be, educating all of our students, and the lower class sizes are crucial to their success.
All right, let me make one more comment and then I'll quit. I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. I spent 25 years in the technology industry.
We're getting off topic here, so I'd ask you to stop.
I came out with none of these goodies that all these kids have today, and I managed to make a good living for 25 years. So let me preface that. You don't need technology to get a good education. You just need good teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Katie Gabriello, 13 Damon Street. Thanks to everyone for showing up tonight. The engaged, active citizenship is truly impressive. I'm here to speak in favor of the Proposition 2.5 override over the next 3 years. My family recently celebrated an exciting milestone. May 2024 marks 10 years since we moved to North Reading. When we moved here in 2014, it was with 1 dog and 1 4-month-old in tow. Now we have 2 dogs, added 2 more kids, and that 4-month-old is now a 4th grader at the little school where his sister is in 2nd grade and his brother is in kindergarten. So that kindergartner, he turned 6 this past Saturday. He is cute as can be and also an absolute nightmare. He is in a class at the little school of 22 kids with 1 teacher who is here tonight and is a saint walking on this earth. I love you, Mrs. Castle. And 1 paraprofessional. If the override fails to pass, next year he is set to be in a class of 21 first graders at the little with 1 teacher and no para. Now granted, I recognize this is not 55 children because thinking of 55 first graders in 1 class is enough to send me straight to the funny farm with hives. And that's not anything that our teachers deserve in 2024. So I'll be frank, the cuts to our very highly ranked public schools scare the crap out of me, starting with the increased class sizes. Our class sizes are already above the state average, and our per pupil expenditures are already lower than the state average. We should be looking to flip those figures instead of making our class sizes bigger and our per pupil spending going down. These will only get worse if we can't pass the override.
I know the number on the table sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. It is for my family, and I know it is for many other families here. I don't want to raise my taxes any more than anyone else, but the cuts at both the school side and on the municipal side, hello, Chestnut Street Bridge, will hurt our town, our residents, and ultimately our property values and make North Reading a less appealing place for people to live. Please join me in voting yes on the override budget tonight and yes at the special election to ensure that North Reading moves forward in the right direction. Thank you.
Sir.
Hi, Tom Fiorentino, 24 Hillview Road. I kind of have a two-part question here. So I have 3 young children in this school program, so when I heard this, I was deeply shocked and wanted to understand more. So I have a few things and figures here. Going up to 2.5% and looking at the numbers on, I like numbers, page, looks like 6, residential real estate taxes is responsible for 60%. I think that's kind of a hidden figure because we also pay other fees and taxes in the motor vehicle excise tax, so we're roughly around 67%. Everybody here in this room is responsible for. So my question is, and there's another one following up to this, is it's going to go up, it's going to go indefinitely, we kind of covered that earlier. What is the next steps as our expenditures are growing in 26, 27, after that's already into effect? What happens in 28 or 29? Have we thought about, or is there anything else on the table after this 3 years prop tax is fully funded and paid for and approved?
Mr. Gilberto.
Thank you. So if I understand the question, you're kind of asking what happens after we get past the override.
I'm saying, let's say the override is passed,
Yeah.
we are fully funded, we paid for it, 3 years, 27, and 28, our expenditures are now going to be increasing.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to have another prop 2.5% in 2028, 2029?
So to be very clear, the override that we're talking about, the total of $10 million phased in over that 3 years, would continue to be taxed in the future years. You know, if we find out at that point in time through the financial planning team and the work of the select board, school committee, myself, and the other officials that we're facing pressures, you'll probably see a lot of what has happened over the past couple of years where we make reductions to budgets in order to balance things.
Okay.
In the end, though, we do have an obligation to come to you with what that impact will be. And at some point, those adjustments may again have impacts, and we'll need to have a conversation as a community. So I don't want to mislead anybody. I think we would love to be able to sit here and say that this amount will carry us forever. We're willing to work as hard as we can to make it last as long as we can into the future. And again, if there's a need to have a different conversation with the community, we'll have that conversation as a community. But I expect that we'll continue doing what we have been doing for multiple years back to try to balance the budgets.
Excellent. And there's another part to this because I want to understand the real estate tax rate to other towns because that was kind of discussed earlier and kind of going over the rates. My understanding is it's $13.21 per thousand, and that's across the board for residential and commercial and everything else in North Reading. Yeah. Is that going up just for residential? Is there anything on the table for commercial at all in the next couple of years, or has that been discussed?
Mr. Gilberto.
That's a great question. So the proposed Proposition 2.5 increase would affect every taxpayer here in town. So residential, commercial, industrial taxpayers would all be impacted in terms of the rate going up and the impact it would have on their tax bill based on their valuation. Right now, the number, it's about 88% of our property tax revenue is residential property. So it's a significant amount, about 12% for the remaining categories. The select board is able to do what they call a classification of the tax rate, and that's to shift more of the burden onto commercial industrial taxpayers. They have a hearing each fall in November where they make a determination about whether to do that. In my 10 years and for many years prior to that, the select board has been hesitant to move to shift the rate because of the dramatic impact it could have on a very small proportion of our tax base that actually is business. So we're talking about local business, small property owners who would be impacted dramatically to the tune of a ratio of $4 for every $1 in reduction for residential property or more. So it's a significant challenge. We have a goal of growing that commercial industrial tax base, but there are limitations, and they include our infrastructure, and we've talked a lot about that in terms of wastewater. There are other limitations in terms of what we as a community are willing to tolerate for traffic and other impacts as well. And those are conversations that I think will continue for years to come.
Excellent. And I'm just going to kind of end with a few just bullet points here. North Reading's real estate tax rate, as we all know, is 13.21. Linfield is 11.99, so a little bit less. But their commercial rate is 19.32. Andover's residential real estate is 13.66. And their commercial rate is 27.32, almost double the rate. I understand that this might go up to 15. One other one, Wilmington, bordering town, 13.06. The commercial rate is 30.06, almost triple. That's helping fund those things, the initiatives that all my kids enjoy and love. I understand where we are right now. 15% I don't think is really good after 3 or 4 years. I think we're back in this room having some of these conversations in some way, shape, or form. I just want to say thank you, everybody here, the fire department. This place, I've been here 6 years. It's the longest place I've ever lived in Massachusetts. I'm proud of this town and a lot of people in this room. We want to make it great. We want to make it for our kids. Thank you for your time.
Christina Gandolfo, 138 Chestnut. I heard earlier, I heard a large number, 3 million thrown out, about how much exactly had already been spent on wastewater and sewer in terms of feasibility, studies, hours billed, things like that. Is there a closer approximation for the total?
Mr. Gilberto. So to be clear, the dollar amount that I referenced earlier is what was approved in October of 2021, if my memory serves me correctly. That was initial appropriation for wastewater planning and design. I believe the number I got from the Public Works Director is that we spent somewhere around low $2 million numbers of that. I'm looking at Joe to sort of nod his head. I can't see him though. He had to step out. Okay, of course, in opportune timing. So we haven't fully exhausted that funding, but we have expended a significant amount of it, both for study, which could prove to be beneficial for the town for another wastewater project in the future, if that's what the town so chose, or otherwise.
Okay, so somewhere in the low twos?
That's my estimate, yeah.
Okay, and so the select board and the town together kind of have now essentially, pretty quietly though, admitted to tabling this project essentially. And my question, well, I think that the spending was extreme. That's a lot of money. And I'd argue in hindsight, it was pretty frivolous. It could have been saved to be spent on more essential items. I mean, we're talking a lot about education. And the potential support and popularity of this project in general was clearly not assessed thoroughly enough. So how can we as taxpayers ensure that our future tax dollars are not being spent in this way and making sure that there's fiscal responsibility here?
So, through you, Mr. Moderator, I appreciate the questions and the comments, but I would note that that funding was authorized by town meeting. And we explained at the time that we were under a time crunch for a state Department of Transportation construction project in order to get design and construction done if we were going to take advantage of it. So I understand the comment about the expense and maybe the concern about it, but at that time, in 2021, there were deadlines that were out of our control that in order to have a chance of maintaining, we needed to expedite and accelerate design and study work. So I can't sit here and give those types of guarantees because we all took the facts that we had at that time and made a determination, and that's what we'll continue to do along the way. I think we felt it was the best option for a project that the town has struggled with. I look to Mr. O'Leary, 60 or 70 years worth of infrastructure struggle. It was an option that was available at that point in time, and we felt it was the best way to proceed, and town meeting agreed.
Okay, so it has been tabled for the moment?
So the select board voted 1 or 2 meetings ago to terminate planning for a wastewater connection to Greater Lawrence Sanitary District. That's correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Hi, Leah Strack-Valersi, 39 Haverhill Street. I just have a clarifying question about the way the override works. So as I understand it, Proposition 2.5 basically caps the town at being able to increase property taxes by an average of 2.5%, and this override would essentially allow the town to increase it more than that. Obviously, what you guys have laid out over the next 3 years, that'll raise about $10.5 million. What happens after FY27? I know that the taxes aren't going back down, but does the town now in perpetuity have the ability to raise taxes above that average of 2.5% year over year?
No. So our ability to increase taxes above the limit of Proposition 2.5 is up to $10 million. And we've discussed a 3-year phasing in, which is the plan at this point in time for appropriateness. We cannot exceed that $10 million. Once we've hit that number, it's the maximum. And in fact, when we go to report to the State Department of Revenue, who is a watchdog for every dollar that we spend, or at least that we authorize to be spent, I will tell you that they're going to say to us, when they look at the allocation, that funding is the limit of what can be spent from the override. It's no more than $10 million. So they're watching what we're doing with regard to that. The growth beyond that would be limited to the 2.5% plus, again, new construction-related new growth.
Thank you.
Hi, Cindy Solomon for Kings Row. I first want to acknowledge the Herculean efforts of many of the parents who are in this room tonight. I know many of you booked babysitters, missed sports games, moved your busy schedules around to be here for your kids in your community, and you should be absolutely commended for that. I feel like I see so many commonalities on what both sides of this vote want for our town. We all want more for our seniors and veterans. We all want our home values to continue to increase. We all want to support our police and fire department, and we want this town to stay a safe place to live. We all want the kids in this town to be happy and successful and go on to continue to contribute back to this town and the incredible progress we've made to this point. But there's only one vote that actually helps achieve that goal, and that's a yes vote. A no vote takes away from our police, our fire department, our seniors, our veterans, our parks, our schools, our safety, our kids, the value of our homes, and the entire community as a whole. Every person in this room will feel that. I hear a lot on the community page and on other avenues about how saying these things is a scare tactic, but they're not scare tactics, they're just scary facts. So therein lies another thing we all agree on. The facts here are scary if this override doesn't pass. They're scary for all of us. A yes vote is the only way to achieve all of our common goals for North Reading. And please also vote yes on Articles 17 and 18 to support our seniors. Please vote yes for yourselves and for all of us. Thank you.
Lynn Murphy, Hemlock Road. Mr. Moderator, I'd like to move the question.
We will move to the question.
Okay. What? I'd like to call the question. I'd like to call the question.
All those in favor of moving to the question, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries to move to the question.
Point of order. Point of order.
Amy?
I'd like a paper ballot, please.
We need 25 people to stand for a paper ballot. It's 25, right? I don't have to count them, do I? Got 25. Okay, we have a sufficient number. We'll go to a paper ballot. Want to describe it? You want to tell them what you're doing? You want to tell them what you're doing? I thought you were going to put a group there, a group there, a group there.
Yeah. So we're gonna take them back.
All right, so get set up. I'd ask you to please remain in your seats while we set up for the paper ballot. We'll be calling up folks to go through the process of the paper ballot. It's going to be on that side, here in the middle, and on that side. But stay in your seats where you are.
ribbons?
Just a clarification on that last vote on moving to the question. I should have declared that a 2/3 majority. Give me one. Just give me one. I'm not gonna vote with it. All right, they're getting set up. What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen is, we're gonna set up 3 stations. I'll call the groups up so it's not a mad rush. You'll get a ballot, perforated piece of paper, yes and no. You'll rip it in half. You'll put one in a vote box and one in a discard box. You'll also change the color of your ribbon. So you've already been recorded as voted. After everybody in the room votes, they'll tally the votes. And then after they do that, I will let you know the outcome. So this will take us through the rest of the night, I'm thinking. We voted on the first budget, right? We voted on the first budget. You are voting, if you vote yes, you're voting for the override budget. If you vote no, you're saying no to the override budget.
Point of order? Point of order?
What?
Point of order? Point of order? Okay, I'll do that. Okay. I thought we were voting to continue the conversation. Not for the...
Move to the question. No.
We already moved to the question, and we moved to a paper ballot.
Discussion's over. I don't know how you did that.
Here's your ballot box.
I usually bring one, but and again, just to be clear to everyone, the paper ballot is for the second motion, only the second motion. The budget has already passed the meeting, okay? The budget with no override has already passed at this meeting. This is for the override budget. You want it or you don't? Yes or no? And it's a majority vote. As was the first vote. If I could have your attention for another minute or two. If I could please have your attention for another minute or two. I know as I look around this room, I haven't seen a crowd like this since, I think it was last year. But that was because we were talking about the wastewater. I haven't seen a crowd like this at a meeting that didn't have something big that we all really cared about. We were for it or we were against it. And I think there's probably people that are here that are new to the process. Town meeting functions under Robert's Rules of Order. Under Robert's Rules of Order, after a vote is completed, later on in the meeting, someone can get up and ask for reconsideration of an article that was already passed. So if you leave and somebody gets up and there's reconsideration and the article gets reconsidered, redebated, and the majority of the people who voted yes have left, and the majority of people who voted no are still here, the outcome is not the same. Everybody follow that? So only for tonight's business. Only for tonight's business. So if you go home after you drop your paper ballot in, that's fine. But if we do another ballot and if it's reconsidered and then we do another paper ballot, you wouldn't be here to put another one in. That's what I'm saying. So it's just tonight. Just tonight. Again, it's 9:30, so we might not get to more business, but if we get to more business, that could be some of it. Thank you.
We're ready.
Point of order. I know. Point of order.
Reconsideration is majority vote, and the motion must be made by somebody on the prevailing side. Sir.
Hi, John Southard, 10 Winterberry Lane. If she can make a motion to do a paper ballot, can we make a motion to override the paper ballot for a verbal ballot? Can I get a second?
Someday they'll reopen the town charter and they'll put in a clause of how to reverse a paper ballot. But the way the town charter is, in reference with town council, you agree? We're going to paper ballot. We had over 25 people standing. That's the way the vote on this is going to be. I have no mechanism within my power to change that. Is that correct?
Just for the sake of the hundreds of kids that are in this building and still awake.
You guys ready? You ready? Okay, if I could have, sir, this first section here to my left. Please go to the table along the wall. And then to my right, this first section to my right. everyone could please take their seats. Okay, we have the vote tally. Yes, 555. No, 181. Motion carries. Sir.
Rob Curtin, 8 Tarbox Lane. Mr. Moderator, I move to motion to adjourn to a time certain.
Give me 1 second.
Needs a time certain.
If you add the word, I need it in writing though.
Sure, we'll write it up.
They'll write it up for you.
Okay.
If you add the words 7 o'clock p.m., June 11th,
Okay.
2024, that works.
Mr. Moderator, I move to adjourn to a time certain on 7 o'clock, June 11th, here again.
Yes.
Sorry, 2024.
Point of order? Point of order? Point of order? Point of order? Here, why don't you say?
Yeah.
Point of order for town council, please.
No. I'm listening. I just need the motion maker over here to review.
Sorry.
I don't think folks know how to vote because we're trying to figure out the answer to a procedural question.
No, I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm just trying to do. I'm
So
listening.
I'm just asking this so we're all operating under the same set of facts for tonight and for tomorrow night. If we adjourn tonight's meeting, is that the end of this session?
Yes. Darren. Okay. Give us a minute because I need the motion in writing.
Could I ask a point of clarification?
Certainly.
If the session ends tonight, is any reconsideration of any article introduced tonight on the table for tomorrow or no?
No, it cannot, anything approved or denied this evening, if we vote to adjourn, is approved or denied as is, cannot come up tomorrow.
Right. Mr. Moderator, I move to adjourn to Tuesday, June 11, 2024 at 7 p.m. in the high school gymnasium, 189 Park Street.
Can we bring it up for another vote tonight? He didn't say 2024 anyway, so bring it up for another vote.
What was that? No, there's no time, there's not a specific time for town meeting in the charter. I'm sorry, I have a motion. I have a motion on the floor. Are you speaking to the motion?
Sorry, Minoska Veldas, 28 Flint Street. I just want to say respectfully, we sat here through a written ballot, okay? We went through that for you, for those few that wanted it. Can we please be respectful? I have a 7-year-old with my 80-plus-year-old parents in bed. who needs to get to school, and my mother's not gonna fall asleep until we get home. So can we have respect go both ways? Thank you.
So I'm going to vote.
Point of order. Point of order.
I have a motion to adjourn on the floor, and that's what, are you speaking to the motion to adjourn?
Yes, I'm speaking to the motion. I'm a little upset about how you helped them and guided them through this process. They should know what they're doing, okay? They're being completely disrespectful to the entire meeting. And to be quite frank, can you control the meeting? Can you control the meeting, please? They shouldn't be yelling like that. They should be respectful to you, the moderator. They should be respectful to everybody else in here. Just because, like little children, they are screaming like crazy, all right? So that's very upsetting. It's upsetting to a lot of people. Take control of the meeting. Thank you.
Point of order. And I would just like to make a comment about respect. I was threatened by someone and had to go to the police officer in this building because people didn't like that I asked for a paper ballot. Talk about disrespect. If you can't come to town meeting and be respectful, you shouldn't be here.
Let's address the motion on the floor, which is to adjourn and until tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Yay! Motion carries. The meeting's adjourned.